Welcome to our 68th podcast. Today we'll be talking about adaptive change in the face of VUCA with our very special guest, Dr. Casey DeBruyn. What's the one thing you can do now to stay flexible while rooted in your key principles in the face of VUCA? Keep listening to find out.
Welcome to Harmonious Workplaces, a podcast about corporate culture, organizational change management, and workplace behavior. Harmonious Workplaces was started by independent consultants Rich Cruz, Ben Kleinman, and Cheryl Volpe to explore, challenge, and build on various organizational culture and change management concepts. It's a blend of theory and practice based on their personal and professional experiences working with companies of all sizes across various industries. If you own a business, lead a team, want new ideas about the corporate environment, or just want to listen to a group of consultants talking about how to make work more enjoyable, we invite you to sit back, relax, and dive in with us to Harmonious Workplaces.
Hello, Harmonious Workplaces listeners. Welcome back to our podcast. We're so happy to have you here with us. And today we're going to talk a little bit about VUCA, and you'll learn a little bit more about what that means a little later on. But I'm joined as usual by my co-host, Cheryl Volpe. Hey, Cheryl.
Hey, Rich. Hi, everyone.
And we have a very, very special guest, somebody that Cheryl and I have had in class and who has been making a splash all over the place. I see him on all the LinkedIn stuff. And we're very, very happy to welcome Dr. Casey DeBruyn. How are you, Casey?
I'm doing well, Rich. Hi, Cheryl. It's great to be here. Thank you.
So great to
Oh,
have you.
thanks. And I just am tickled pink. I mean, honestly, the one thing that I can remember from years ago was you going and say, Rich, have you considered going into OD? Because I think you'd be good in OD. So here's what happens, Casey, when you tell somebody what they should do.
You end up on a podcast at hyper early in the morning. Yeah.
That's right. Hyper.
Ta-da!
Ta-da.
Look what you did. Well, Dr. Casey, could you do us a huge favor? Can you just kind of give us a brief introduction, tell us where you came from and what you do and all that good stuff?
Yeah, sure. So Dr. Casey DeBruyn, essentially I'm an industrial organizational psychologist. And what I do is I look at organizations and I help them to become better, right? I make work suck less, and then I try to make other people's lives better through their work. I look at all different aspects. Right now, I'm really deep into anticipatory and adaptability in organizations. So that's what we're going to talk about.
Awesome. And one thing I want to mention is that Dr. Casey can say, right, ethically, you're a psychologist, which is something that is, a lot of people have, an issue with, because they're like, well, I do industrial organizational psychology, so I'm a psychologist, but ethically, because you are a PhD,
Yep.
You are a psychologist, right?
Yeah. So it's an industrial organizational psychology, and emphasis is in organizations and management. Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
Right on.
And the difference there is that you have that credential to be the psychologist part, whereas Rich and I and other folks who haven't gone that extra mile, we don't get the PhD, we don't get the doctorate, and we're practitioners. Same end result in part, in that you just said it's management and business practices, right? We cover that too.
Right. Yeah. I'm not here to talk about deep-rooted anxiety. I can't do that. I'm not clinical psychologist.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. But what you're going to bring up here and being adaptive and VUCA, and you're going to have to explain that you are already starting our podcast off with an acronym, and it was not my fault this time, Cheryl.
You did slip the OD in there. I did want to say.
Oh, I did do that. Didn't I?
But I just, I didn't want to be disruptive.
All right. Well, you caught me. But so, but this kind of stuff brings up emotions, right? And causes, things that where people's behaviors are changed, right? So
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So VUCA, for everybody listening, stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And those are dealing with environmental situations, right? So right now in business, in the world of business, we have what we call a VUCA environment. It's volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex, it's ambiguous, right?
Right.
And we see that on all fronts. We see that on political front, on the economic front, on the technological front. And when you have massive change like that, that's coming in and pushing on organizations, what we have then is either two responses, either a reactive response, which normally doesn't bode well because you're only dealing with that one issue at that one time, or you can have an adaptable response, which is a construct of being a little bit anticipatory, looking at trends in advance, right? But then also building out your organization so that when you do have that VUCA moment, right, when the tariffs go into place, or when the oil spikes up, or when the stock market goes down, you're not kind of, lack of a better word, freaking out. You're like, okay, we knew this was coming. We have plans in place. We can adapt to it. And it's how you build out your organization that makes a difference.
Right on. Yeah. We recently had a guest on that was talking about neurodivergent populations. Right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that we were talking about is that, people and their behaviors, right? That amygdala response of, what was that, Cheryl? Fight,
Fright, and fawn.
Fawn. Yeah, there was
A mechanism.
another one. But so she mentioned 4 of them. I can't remember the other one. But
fight, flight, freeze, fawn.
Freeze. Yeah, right. And fawn. Right. So but the thing is, like, you can't make good decisions when you're in that VUCA state, right? And without some kind of resilience and adaptability, right?
Well, I think you're onto something with that construct. So let's take that idea and let's expand it out into an organization.
Please.
Right. Yeah. We'll talk about tariffs because everybody's talking about tariffs and it's kind of a big deal. All right. So when the government initiated all these tariffs, people kind of lost their minds, right? Oh, it's going to shut down businesses. It's going to jack prices up. People are rushing to buy a car before the next year because prices are going up. But everybody was talking about how they didn't see this coming. But let's take a step back. During the last administration, the last Trump administration, we all saw that government, that Trump's government, was very pro-tariff, right? So looking to the back and seeing what he was doing with tariffs back then, 2020, 2021, all that, we can assume that he will do the same in this new administration.
Right. Okay. I get that.
He campaigned on it.
He told everyone, this is what we're going to do. So to react in a way of, oh, we didn't know, it's, you knew, but you just didn't take action, right? So being anticipatory, looking at long-term trends, you can say that this administration is very pro-tariff. And so now we can assume that this coming in, again, that this administration will still be pro-tariff. They've said these things. So as an organization, what do we need to be doing? Well, we need to be looking at our supply chain. We need to be negotiating rates. We need to be seeing what the trends are with steel or technology or whatever we need to bring in. And we can be proactive in that stance. That's called being anticipatory. A great guy, he's a futurist. His name's Daniel Burrus. Have you guys ever heard of him?
Oh, no, I haven't.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
Cheryl has.
Cheryl has, yeah. So Daniel Burrus wrote this book way back, I want to say 2015, 2016, maybe earlier. And it's all about looking at long-term trends. So you got to use a little bit of math, right? But by looking at short-term trends and long-term trends, you can start looking and understanding how business is moving. You can be anticipatory. When you're anticipatory, you're also becoming adaptable.
Got
right?
it.
And adaptability is not just being flexible to respond to market changes or something like that, but it's ingrained in your leadership, in your culture, in your workforce, looking at your structures.
Mm.
All right. And then also looking at your tech. So how are you using AI? What's your digital adaptability? Right?
Sure.
Are you using the best tools that help your people accomplish the jobs in the most proficient way? If you're not, you need to step back and look at that, right? So that's what we talk about when we talk about being an adaptable organization. It's not just being able to see, oh, steel's going to go up, tariffs on steel are going to go up, it's going to impact my business. But okay, when this happens, how do we respond, right? And do I have people that are in my supply planning or my logistics that are cross-trained in negotiation, that are cross-trained in ordering, that are cross-trained in, how we budget out materials? What about my manufacturing force? Are they trained in the best ways to reduce scrap and waste? Right?
Right.
What about my leadership? Can I take a leader who might be really good in logistics and can I put them into, I don't know, we'll say ordering, purchasing on the manufacturing floor so that they can help navigate that adaptable environment where people maybe have to shift and pivot, not only in how they run their business, but in how they do their work.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Am I getting that, like, the stats class that we've all had to take was not for naught? Like, we need to have.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, yes. And you don't have to be a math wizard. Like,
Right.
I went into IO psychology because Lord knows I'm horrible at math, right? But if you are able to look at long-term trends, and if you're able to kind of look at, predictive analytics, that stats word, right? Predictive analytics, and say, this is where we think it's going, or even look at your organization, your industry 5 years out, 10 years out, what's coming in, what's changing. You can begin putting actions in place now so that when you do reach that milestone, you're not having to do a 180 pivot, right? Maybe it's just a short turn or small pivot. One of the things I've often talked about around adaptability is looking at your talent in your workforce.
Mm.
And this is kind of where I've seen a lot of organizations fall down. And I say that not just because of my experience, but I've looked at like 156 plus studies, meta-analysis on what is in adaptable organization, what is in resilient organizations. One of the biggest gaps that I've seen is that people do not upskill and cross-train their workforce, right?
Sure.
So we're looking at upskilling people not only for leadership, all right? But think about that lattice framework, right? What about internal mobility? What about their ability to understand new processes or constructs? What about exposure to project management? All these different soft skills, along with the hard skills, they're not cross-training their people, right? They have Bob, and Bob is an accountant, and Bob sits in finance.
Right.
And Bob will work and grind and move up eventually to a chief financial officer role, right? Okay, but look at all the things that finance touches in an organization. Right? Not only payroll, right? But also in insurance, also in transportation, logistics, supply, materials, equipment, everything, right? Why don't we cross-train Bob in some of these other areas, give him additional tools and knowledge so that when that time comes and we need to be adaptable, Bob can easily step into any one of those roles.
Sure.
And with an eye towards cost savings, efficiencies, reducing redundancies, he can actually benefit and help the organization.
That makes sense.
Great
That
point.
makes sense.
We often talk about how human resources ends up in that role anyway, either by force, just because HR
Oh yeah.
to overlap with so many other groups, not just compliance, payroll, and benefits, but onboarding, succession planning, all the bookends too. And that's a role that people generally assume is going to overlap with a lot of other groups. But I think what you're saying is that other roles need to break out of their silos in a similar fashion and take a more horizontal look. And that adds to the adaptability in anticipation of the volatility, right?
Yeah, exactly right. Why does that work? So let's get into the human side of it.
Sure.
Bob, we'll use Bob the accountant. Bob the accountant has a very specific set of skills, right?
Right.
Bob went to school. He as a CP,
Not the Liam Neeson.
not the
type
Leeson,
thing.
right? But he went to school. He's a CPA. He understands finance. He's also really good at looking at patterns within numbers, right? And understanding how finance is budgeted out and whether it's waste or it can be written off or whatever. So that means that Bob would be really good in manufacturing too, looking at how equipment is used, looking at downtimes, tacit run rates, looking at the cost of material and how we're using the material. And then looking at the scrap that's left over and how can we use that in a different way. Right. So and not just accounting or finance, right?
Sure.
But take any role, take someone who's in customer service, in sales. They are in touch with what the customer wants. They know what the customer wants, right?
Yeah.
They sit in the call center all day. They're hearing the complaints. They're hearing what people like. They could easily move over to marketing and have a very focused, very intense contribution to the marketing group, targeting people for what the customers like.
Right.
They've got the data.
Right.
They got, or product development. Here's what customers don't like, right?
Right.
So there's tons of ways. So being an adaptable organization, when you're talking about being adaptable, you're also talking about building a culture where your people feel free and empowered to cross-train in multiple areas. And I'm not just talking about like HR. I went from payroll to succession planning, right? I'm talking across the organization. What does that do? It does a couple of things for the people. One is it gives them additional skills. It helps grow and develop them, right? But then it also embeds their knowledge and it brings their knowledge from one area to the next. So now they're bringing their knowledge, their understanding of wherever they're working before into a new area, bringing new innovation, new collaboration, new insights, right? Also bringing a lot of problem solving skills. All right.
I have a question about Dr. Casey. So if that kind of idea is not already in a corporate culture or organizational culture from the leaders, from the top down, this is when we hear stay in your lane, right? It's important that that is part of the culture already, or it creates another kind of tension, right?
Right. And so now what we have to do is we have to take a step back and we say, what's your culture like? If your culture is siloed, if your culture has traditional hierarchies, right? And you have a traditional hierarchical matrix, let's stop and let's look at where people are now.
Right.
And let's take a moment to understand where they want to go. And let's look at their skills, not from a very tactical, I'm an accountant, I'm an HR person, I'm a customer service rep, and more into a very high level. Here's where these could be applied, right? So transferable skill sets.
Yeah.
And a lot of stuff is transferable. People they think when they think about transferable skill sets, they think about, collaboration and, getting along at the office and, professionalism and communication. But transferable skill sets can also be, hey, I know how to access data in this system.
Sure.
Let me show you how to get that data so that you can use it for this area. All right.
Yeah. Makes sense.
But it's a culture shift. And we know that culture is one of the hardest things to change in our organization.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's do this. Let's take a quick break.
Yeah.
When we come back, let's dive a little bit more into how companies can be more adaptive, and just explore this a little further.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. We'll be right back.
At Harmonious Workplaces, we believe work should provide purpose, satisfaction, and growth. We empower people to thrive by fostering environments where individuals can find meaning in their work and organizations can succeed through thoughtful, well-executed strategies. We're committed to making work better for the people who do it and the leaders who guide them. To discover how Harmonious Workplaces can impact your organization, visit www.harmoniousworkplaces.com and book a free 30-minute information session with one of our consultants today. Again, that's www.harmoniousworkplaces.com.
And welcome back. So we have been talking about volatility, uncertainty. I can't remember what C means. What's C meaning?
Complexity.
Complexity and ambiguity in the workplace and being adaptive with Dr. Casey here. And I as you're talking in the last segment about the upskilling of people for different tasks that maybe outside of their job analysis, right? How can you talk a little bit more about org design, right? Like, because you had mentioned the last time, like a hierarchy, right? So we've got a centralized hierarchical design, but what if we looked at something that was flatter or matrixed? Or I know you've talked about matrix in the class that we had in org behavior, so can you talk a little bit more about org design on this?
Yeah. So when we think about adaptability in organizations, I like to pull up what I call the ODA, which is organizational design for adaptability. I call it Adapt X with adapt, right? And then X for cross-functional. All right. So one of the things we have to think about then in org design is most people approach organizational design from a top level down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the quintessential boxes on a screen, names, lines, connecting boxes. What if
the org chart you find in
the org chart we find in every company?
Yep.
But what if we flip that? What if instead of having this hierarchical organizational design, we had more of what would be like an organizational network, right? So you might have pods or teams or groups of people who normally wouldn't sit together.
Sure.
But for purposes of being highly adaptable, now you have this fluidity in your organization. Case in point, let's take any tech company. All right. Tech companies traditionally run lean or they run very deep. It's one of the, it's kind of one of those two.
Mm-hmm.
What if we, instead of having the developers and the coders and the finance people and the HR people and all the organizational change, right, and the sales, what if we put people with specific skills in a pod and had them focus on a problem or an issue or a product?
Sure.
Or maybe it's something that's pushing down on the organization, an external factor, political, economic, sociological, technological, legal, right? The whole pestle analysis.
The whole pestle thing. Yep.
What if we
you wonder why we talk in acronyms?
I try really hard not to. But what if we did that? what would that do to the capabilities and the innovation for the organization? Well, one is you've removed the silos where they would normally have to work from handoff to handoff to handoff. You put
Right.
them all together. And Google did something similar to this with their product lines, right? Where they would put people into groups and they would do, work on Google Maps and Google Apps, and wildly successful. But what they did is they took people not for their job titles, not for what their degree was in, but for what they wanted to learn,
Mhm.
right? And what skills they brought.
Love that.
So what if we did that?
Right. So does that to learn what skills they brought, is that through assessment? Is that through I like are there instruments to do that? How can a company get that kind of inventory, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Here's a novel idea. And whenever I say this, it blows people's minds. But there's a very specific assessment you can use to tap into someone's hidden skills that maybe you didn't know they have.
Mm.
You ask them.
Yeah.
Use your words.
That-
Use your words.
that-
I don't have a degree in that.
At any point in time, you have people that have passions outside of their job, right? You have people that have knowledge or experiences from past work. You have people that are curious, so they explore. What if we gave them a catalyst or an opportunity to leverage some of those skills inside their own work?
Mhm.
Right? So, for example, we know that Rich loves organizational development, right? OD.
Mhm.
All right. But Rich also plays music,
Mhm.
right? And Rich likes to run, right? And
Likes or is arguable,
yeah,
but sure.
yeah. But he has other hidden skills. So what if we gave Rich the opportunity to say, hey, you know what? This is a talent I have. This is knowledge I have. This is a skill I want to develop further. I would really like to work on this project over here.
Mhm.
And we allowed people to do that,
Right.
right? We have massive databases. Anybody that has a Workday or any type of HRIS, right? Anybody that has any type of LLM, right? Anybody that has any type of learning management system, they have that data.
Sure.
So go out and get the data and then compile records. Ask people,
Yeah.
say, hey, what's a skill that you have that people normally don't associate with you? Right?
Yeah.
How could you leverage that skill here? And let's get a
Right.
little bit creative and let's get a little bit adaptable, but then let's also give people opportunities to grow and nurture their whole selves at work rather than being stuck into a little box, a little cubicle with Bob looking at spreadsheets, right? And filing TPS reports.
And that would be a
Right.
part of the culture versus, hey, everyone, we're going on a retreat and I'm going to get to know Bob a little better around a campfire with a cocktail. That's not a way to put it into the culture, right? That's isolated and that's not always taken seriously and it's vastly expensive.
Right. Oh, it's vastly expensive. And then most of the time, forced family fun, people don't really like.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But what if we gave Bob a system, or we implemented a system where Bob can go out and talk about all the things that he studied or his past experiences or transferable skills from his past job, or, gosh, when I was a junior in college, I did an internship at this one automotive company. And here's
Mhm.
what I learned about, cross-functional analysis or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I enjoy that. I look at that. How can we apply that in our everyday work? What that does is it does a couple different things. One is it really engages your people.
Right.
So you want to talk about ROI? Okay. How about engagement, innovation, and retention?
Mm-hmm.
All right. The next thing it does is it brings innovation and creativity to a new level in your organization.
Sure.
All right. And this isn't just for, your workforce. This is also for your leaders. Okay.
Mhm.
So you have leaders, you have people that you have identified as potential hypos or they're in your succession plans. How beneficial is it for that individual to learn the entire organization and not just their department, not just a couple areas around their department, but the entire organization? And if we can make the leaders adaptable and they can bring that culture and that creativity and that engagement in their leadership roles, they can inspire that within the teams that they're leading at that time.
That makes sense. And all this reminds me of some motivational theories, right? Where, like when you have this volatility and uncertainty and all that stuff, right? If we look at Maslow's hierarchy, that stability level is just, it's out the window, right?
It really is.
But-
Yeah.
Right. But if you tap into somebody's skills, somebody's self-efficacy, right? Then you're tapping into that esteem part of that hierarchy, right? Where they're feeling like they can contribute, that they have value, that there's purpose to not just that the stuff that's in their job description, but that the other parts of them that they bring to work every day are being used. Does that make
Absolutely.
sense?
Absolutely. And what you're getting out of that then is you're bringing not only an individual along who otherwise may have been moderately disengaged or even fully disengaged, right? But you're inspiring them and you're bringing innovation into your company by someone who doesn't live and work in that role. So they don't have those imposed confines,
Right.
right? You have additional creativity, which drives problem solving, which drives new product development. It drives cost reduction, drives savings. It pushes all of that.
Go figure. All the people stuff
And
actually hits the bottom line.
it really does. And all you got to do is use my highly technical tool of asking them. Yeah, ask them.
And like you said, like so many of the HRIS systems out there, like I know Workday, ADP, and a few other things out there, they have a skills bank that says, here's the skills, here's how long they've used them. When they have an LMS, it pulls in the skills that they would have learned.
Yep.
So you have all that, available if you want to do an analysis of your work.
Yeah. And here's the thing, though. Not everybody uses it because why? Why isn't Bob going out and putting in all of his skills?
Fear
Fear.
that someone else will see what he is bringing. Try to make sure he doesn't have an opportunity to bring that because they were afraid that the Bob may eclipse them. That's certainly happened.
Yeah, fear, but then also apathy, right? But then also people tend to think in symmetry. So if I'm an accountant and you ask me to put down all my skills, what am I going to put down?
Your resume,
Just-
essentially.
My accounting skills,
Yeah.
right? But
Right.
what if I am really good with structural stuff or even creative art or writing or speaking or customers or dealing with people, right? So the culture, again, you need to engage with your folks, talk to them, show them how to think more high level, show them how to think more or visually spatially with their skills, and not be afraid to put down
Mhm.
everything that they want to do, that they're good at, right? And, I speak French. I speak French very poorly. Okay.
You almost impressed me.
And, and I'm sure that when I'm in France and I'm talking to the waiter in the restaurant, I sound like a toddler. I'm almost 90% of it. So it's not great, but I can do it, right? Okay, so put that down, right? I'm not great at it, but I can do it, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
get people to open up and share all about themselves, because now what you have is you have a hidden treasure trove of knowledge, skills, and ability that can be applied in a creative manner to your organization. And you can use those skills cross-functionally. You can map it with job analysis, right? You can do data analysis out of Workday or ADP or whatever. And you can be like, hey, you know what? We need someone who's really good at dealing with very complex customer problems. And then you can, what are all the skills that go into that?
Right.
Pull that out of ADP. And you'd be surprised who comes up.
Makes sense.
And when it's not a regular part of a culture, those conversations, if they're rare, it gives this expectation to employees that, oh, something different or strange or potentially dangerous is about to happen, or I'm about to lose my job, or hey, maybe this is a career path that is about to be guaranteed to me because someone else is leaving. Those speculation, that idea that speculation runs wild because it is unusual, corrupts the process, right? But if it's a part of the culture, as a routine part of those kinds of conversations, then it's normalized, and people don't feel like they're being offered something and then it gets pulled away. People aren't thinking they're being replaced because they're being asked these questions. It's like, hey, I have a potential career path here if I want it. That's the tone that the leaders have to say.
I 100% agree with that, right? So culture drives a lot of stuff. And there's this old saying that, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? Well, one, he never really said it like that, but that's a different story. The other thing is that strategy will always be anything. So if you have an adaptable strategy, part of your strategy will be driving an adaptable organizational culture, right? And now if you have people that have the willingness not only to continuously learn and develop those skills, but they express curiosity in roles, they bring innovation to potential very complex problems in the organization from a pathway maybe you didn't see. You have people that are engaged, but then you also have a structure that supports that, right?
Sure.
The lattice framework, the pod framework, however you want to set it up, where you can make decisions, where you can design models and workflows. You have processes that support that innovation and that drive. When you have that external factors that push down on it, that VUCA, now you have a wonderful internal collective brain trust of people that can solve the problem.
That makes a lot of sense.
And they're engaged and inspired to share those skills as well.
And because of that, they feel valued, and that deepens loyalty and productivity.
Right. And you've also alleviated that whole thing of, I've only done X at this company, I can't do anything else. Right.
Right on.
Which can lead to disengagement, the quiet quitting, the siloing, again, isolation.
All that other stuff we're seeing. Yeah.
Let's do this. We're going to take one more quick break. And we come back. Let's talk about how can we, because all this sounds wonderful, right? But how can practically a company put this into play? I mean, it's certainly attainable. We've seen it happen, but can you help us kind of go through that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Cool. We'll be right back.
Meet Hermie the HR Hermit Crab. Laugh, learn, and lead better with Hermie. Hermie is here to tackle workplace madness with heart and humor from Harmonious Workplaces. He's perfect for HR pros, leaders, and change makers. Hermie teaches workplace lessons through cartoons and is great for team discussions and workshops. Get your copy on Amazon now. www.hermiehrhermitcrab.com. Again, that's hermiehrhermitcrab.com.
And we're back. So we've been talking with Dr. Casey about being adaptable, about taking all the KSAs, the knowledge, skills, and abilities that people have and cataloging them and having people, changing the the design of the organization. And all of this sounds wonderful and beautiful and theory based, right? But how can we practically put some of that into play where the rubber meets the road?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it all starts with looking at your model, right? Looking at your current organizational design. Before you rush off and chase a new shiny object, right? Oh, this is the latest thing for business. What you really need to do is you need to get all of the information possible.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at where is our leadership now in their adaptability.
Right.
Are they highly adaptable? Are they inflexible? Are they very rigid? How adaptable are they as leaders? And there's tons of assessments you can leverage to determine someone's willingness to kind of mold, adapt, lead during volatile situations. You do that across the board. You're looking at your culture, looking at your structure. Going back to what Cheryl said earlier, do we have silos? Do we have good communication? Do we kind of hoard information? What's our culture like? What's our structure like?
Mm-hmm.
What about our workforce? Right? Are they inspired? Are they engaged? Do they feel safe? A big part of adaptability is psychological safety, kind of going back to what Cheryl was alluding to with, I'm afraid I might lose my job. I don't want to speak up, right? But having that adaptability, having that psychological safety allows people to take risks, right? Having the courageous risks, knowing that if I try it and it doesn't work, I'm going to be okay, all right? I think you got to look at all your tools. What's holding you back? What's not working? And then also, where are you redundant? You'd be surprised at the amount of redundancy that organizations have in their tech simply because somebody wanted something somewhere. Well, not only is that an additional cost every year with licensing and support and all that, but it also creates a barrier because if I'm using, I don't know, some type of program for, drawing, right? It's like some type of CAD program. And I'm the only one that uses that CAD program.
And everybody else is doing
Visio or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I've created a barrier because now people can't open it. They can't look at it. They can't share information, right? So let's get everybody on the same page with tools. And then let's look at how are you leveraging new tools? I'm going to say it. Don't yell at me. AI, right? AI is not a system or a tool that you can use to replace people.
Sure.
You need people to run the AI, right? So it's really employee focused, person focused, where it supports additional work for the person, right? Not replacing a person, right?
Sure.
That it's not a sentient being. It doesn't have cognitive reasoning, right?
It does not have general intelligence.
It doesn't have general intelligence, right? So those are things we have to think about. After that, you start saying, what do we need to do? Where are we lacking in adaptability? And that's hard sometimes because you have to hold a mirror up and look back at the organization, right? Look back at the leadership, look back at the workforce. Right. Are we innovating? Are we growing? Are we stagnant? Right?
Yep.
And then it's a lot of assimilation. So like, let's say you're like a fintech company and you're growing and you're expanding into multiple markets. Everything is great, but your organizational structure is rigid, right? It's slowing regulatory responses. It's slowing innovation between teams. You become bureaucratic. How can you break free of that? Well, you start looking at kind of like, implementing like a hub and spoke model. Okay.
Sure.
Where you're driving strategy, but local teams are adopting to those specific market needs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you're looking at your leadership adaptability and you're enabling higher powers of decision-making at lower levels, right? So
Right.
the senior director for the region doesn't have to go get approval from the vice president to do every little thing. There's some accountability and some support there, right?
Yeah.
You're looking at mobility programs, shifting between areas. So I might have an expert over here in tech, but I might have another person over here that's looking at all the types of different investment opportunities. Why can't they work cross-functionally and share ideas, share knowledge, support each other in a new hub spoke model?
Sure.
And what about analysis? So now let's get to our tech, our tools we're using. Is it a good system? Right? Does it make sense? Does it react in real time? Does it do predictive analytics? Which, if you're in fintech, you need predictive analytics, right? So how can you speed up decision making, still maintain regulatory compliance, but then also drive some engagement and innovation within your areas?
That makes sense.
So that's a practical idea of how it could work. Now, people say, "Oh, well, this is only for big companies." No, a small startup.
Small companies, and that's where I've been for most of my career.
Yeah.
And I know, Cheryl, you worked for a smaller company, right? That adaptability is, if you don't adapt, you die, right? I mean, that's...
Especially when the budget is leaking. You have to be alert to what you have in your stable.
Yeah. And one of the things that people often forget about is when they're starting a company, they're building it with the brand, right? With the teams, with the hierarchy, but they're not intentional about the culture, and the culture then develops organically. Right?
That makes sense.
And I always tell people I talk with or companies I'm consulting for, you get the culture you deserve.
Quoting you on that one, that's a beauty.
Ouch, in some cases.
If you are going to let your culture develop organically, right, what you're getting is you're getting a mix of everybody that comes into your company that is bringing their culture with them.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And that's great if that's what you want to do. But if you want innovation, you want people to feel safe, you want people to speak up, you want to drive this adaptability, you need to embed that into your culture. And you need to do that through training, through engagement, through leadership modeling the behaviors, right? And you need to support when people demonstrate that behavior. You need to applaud it. You need to showcase it. You need to use it as a model to show other people, hey, this is what we can do if we just let go a little bit.
Yeah. Makes sense.
And that takes trust.
It takes trust. It takes time. It takes leadership driving it, right?
Right.
If you're looking at programs like upskilling, you can't just upskill somebody or tell someone, poof, you're empowered.
Right. It's not the Matrix. You can't just download.
Right? You just,
right. Yes.
And I can't just go to someone who's been at the organization for 5 years and has very, very confined ideas or beliefs about what their role is and what their value to the company is and say, well, I want you to completely shift that. Right?
Yeah.
I have to give you tools and ideas and innovation, philosophies, support, and the culture has to push you to do that.
Right.
Now, some people will say, I don't like that. It doesn't work for me. It's not what I want. Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
But if the overwhelming majority of your culture is around this cross-functional adaptability and not looking at people as roles, but looking at people as what they can do as people,
right?
Now you have something on.
That makes sense.
I've been doing some research on CRM, as in crew resource management. You see, and just it's fascinating to see the differences between the kinds of cultures we're talking about, and just switching that into the high stress, the emergency around the EMTs, aviation, aerospace, and how adaptable those crews need to be because it is a matter of life and death. as part of their
Right.
job. And airlines, Lufthansa, I just understood recently that they repeatedly change the crews and pilots. They intermingle them on a regular basis so that nobody gets too comfortable in any particular team or environment, so that they are all on top of their game with all of their skills all of the time.
Right.
Right. Right.
And
That makes
that's
sense.
ultimate adaptability, because it is a high stake environment.
Right. If you're looking for a great model on adaptability and anticipatory thinking, look to any special forces unit in any branch of the military.
Mm. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Jocko Willink talks a lot about extreme ownership with the SEALs, right? When he was leading the SEALs during the global war on terror. But then also, if you look at any other type of special operations group, pararescue, right? People working in the Coast Guard with the DEA, looking at Army Rangers, the special forces within the Army, Marine Force Recon. They're all teams, but they're all highly adaptable. And more importantly, they're all cross-trained in other people's roles.
Right. That's amazing, because they're specialists, right? I mean, it's a special thing, but they're specialists in this particular scenario. They have
Right.
to adapt to all the other different scenarios that they're put into.
Right. And if something happens, if a member goes down, there's someone else there that can pick that up and play that role. Right. So not only do they have specialized training to be adaptable, to think creatively, right? Having an equal voice among the team, to share thoughts, ideas, suggestions, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they also rely on each other individually to bring their own skills and their own best self to that team every day, right?
Excellent.
And so they have cross-functional adaptability. They have a leadership that supports that. They have a culture that demands that, right? And it all builds out.
Right on.
Bringing it back into the sphere where the culture, get the culture you deserve. It is not necessarily a demand to have that adaptability, but
Right.
leaders want that adaptability. And I just want to put out there that even in the best of circumstances, there's no crystal ball, right? Even in predictive exercises with all the data in the world, there is no crystal ball. So it does come back to that culture, I would guess, that because that VUCA is going to be there, and that is a foundation for change. We talk about it all the time. This podcast is about change. Make change
Right.
a friend. It's what we talk about all the time. Unless you can't make change your friend in the face of VUCA without that culture, right? I guess I'm kind of wrapping
That's
that
right.
all together. That would be
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. So VUCA will always be there, right? It's just a continuum or of what the VUCA is, right? That even in relatively normal times, right? There's always VUCA, right? There's always a disruptor. There's new technology. There's something that happens with the government. There's always VUCA. The times we're living in now are extreme, right? We see this across multiple areas. We have technology, rapid advancement of, geopolitical issues. We have all these different things, economic flux coming into play. So that continuum ramped up. But VUCA's always there, right?
Right.
It might be isolated to an industry. It might be isolated to a specific area like economics or politics or tech,
Sure.
right? Environmental. But VUCA is always there. So if you're adaptable in your organization, you can manage any part of that VUCA continuum from very slight upsets to massive disruptions. And you can do that with your people by tapping into their skills, their wills, and their ability, and getting them to work cross-functionally and share ideas.
Beautiful. Awesome.
beautiful.
Well, we've come to that time where we're going to be saying goodbye in a second, but boy, we could this just scratches the surface, but you got pretty deep into this, so really appreciate you being here. Dr. Casey, can you share with the audience how they can contact you and anything that you wanted to put help put the cherry on the top of this sundae?
Sure, absolutely. So right now, organizations are facing massive disruption. Um, if you are wanting to learn more about how you can help your organization, look at your workforce, or even just how do I adapt and grow my workforce to kind of mature and succeed in these VUCA times, right? Just reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn. Very easy to find. I think I'm the only Dr. Casey DeBruyn out there. So
Probably right. The one and only.
I'm probably easy to get a hold of. Just reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy to connect and brainstorm on how we can help.
Right on. Awesome. Well, thanks a million for being here, Dr. Casey. We really appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. And
Thank you.
Cheryl, you want to take us out today?
Yeah, sure. Thank you again, Dr. Casey.
Thank you.
So much to think about.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Don't forget, everyone, make change your friend.
Thanks for listening to Harmonious Workplaces. You can find Harmonious Workplaces on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and other streaming platforms. We'd love any feedback on whatever channel you find us on. Please rate, like, and share our podcast with your network, and remember to add Harmonious Workplaces to your list of favorites to get notified about each new episode.